Welcome to the Bold Life Movement podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Rich, and each week I bring you inspiring stories from real people to help you live a more passionate and intentional life. You'll learn how to up-level in everything from relationships, entrepreneurship and leadership, to spirituality, sexuality, and yes, even money. If you're interested in raising your game to be a better business owner, a better lover, and a happier, more fulfilled human, then you're in the right place. No more living on autopilot. You are just an episode away from a bolder, better, more fulfilling life. Welcome back to the Bold Life Movement podcast. This is episode number 62, and today I'm chatting with international hustler and host of the Growth List podcast, Sean Kim. Sean, it's so nice to get to meet you. I'm really excited to have you on the Bold Life Movement and get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well. I'm really excited to be here and all the listeners that are, the watchers, I guess, that are watching this.
Awesome. So give us a little bit of a background. I know some of your story, moved abroad, started an online business, but I want to hear from you how that first leap to Argentina even came about.
Yeah, it was almost out of desperation, actually. If we're talking about Argentina, it was at a time in my life where in a period of about 6 months, probably the worst things you can imagine a 20 or 21-year-old can go through in the developed world, that is,
yes,
happened at the same time. So 6 months, I dropped out of university, and I'm Asian, right, which is like illegal to do.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how that went with my family when they were expecting me to be doctors and lawyers, and for me to drop out of university, it's like a crime.
Yeah.
And the reason why I dropped out was to pursue entrepreneurship. And, nobody in my family knows what that is. And it was a lot of confusion that was happening around that time. And then about 3 months later, just a lot of things happened and our business went down.
Okay.
And
the business that you had started.
The business that we had started about 9 months ago, or about 12 months ago, 3 months after I dropped out, it went down. So here I am, I've moved to a new city, and I decided that I was going to pursue this path, go against some of the traditional things that my parents or my friends were telling me. They were telling me, don't drop out. What are you doing? You got 1 year left. I had 1 year left, by the way. So it was a very risky decision at that time.
The investment had been made.
It has been, right? And at this point, I was in a new city, didn't have any friends, and I dropped out of university, was basically shunned by my family, and was away from my best friends. And then my business first failed. Everything that I just went into.
Where were you living at the time?
So I was starting in Montreal. I went to university at McGill University, for anyone that knows.
Yeah, great school.
Yeah, they call it the Harvard of Canada, which is an internal joke in itself. And then Toronto was where I was starting my business, and that's where I was living at that time. So new city for me. It was a biggest city in Canada.
Yeah.
And yeah, so at this point, I was fairly lost. I was still dedicated for some reason. This irrational part of my brain was telling me, don't go back to school. You can still figure this out. And I just hustled for the next 3 months. And eventually I found myself getting a pretty good job in New York, because it's the place that I really wanted to be. And during this time, actually, I forgot to mention the reason why I wanted to go to New York and not drop out and not continue school was I went on this 10-day silent meditation trip and just kind of had this whole revolution. And we can go into that if you want. And just around the end of that 6 months period, I got my visa, paid about $2,000 out of my own pocket, and rented out, signed away my lease in Toronto, signed a new lease in New York, packed up all of the stuff that I had, which I'm a minimalist, so I've got 2 suitcases, and that's what I live by. And
convenient.
Convenient, very minimalist. And I got to the border and I got denied.
Even though you had the visa?
Even though I had the visa, there's an interview process that you need to go through, and they decided to deny the visa. So at this time, it was about 4 a.m. and they basically sent me back. I had to find a Greyhound to go back to Toronto. Didn't have a home, didn't have any friends there, at least close ones. And
And had a lease
no
that you'd
job,
already signed in New York.
signed away in New York, paid my deposit, paid my security deposit, all that stuff. And at this point, you can just start listing out all the things that were happening in my life. So I had a big ego at that time, so I didn't even want to call my parents or tell them what happened because I wanted to figure it out myself. But I didn't have any money, no degree, no job, no friend, nothing. So the first night back, I stayed at a hostel, just found whatever I could just to be able to sleep, not be homeless, literally.
Yeah.
And called up a kind of an acquaintance and ended up just crashing on his couch for 2-3 months, trying to figure things out. And that really was the lowest part of my life. And everything that I believed, everything that I thought would happen, none of it happened. It went 180 degrees. And I decided at that point, I feel like I need this radical change in my life. Clearly, the patterns and the decisions that I'm making in the traditional path didn't work out, and I need to have this dramatic mindset shift and physical change. And I read an article about Buenos Aires. All this is not random. This is not this genius plot of people always ask me, like, why Buenos Aires? I had no plan. I mean, it was just I picked a place on a map, and I knew that it was far away as possible from Toronto. And it was a different language, different culture. So I booked a one-way ticket at that time to Buenos Aires, and I had about $700 US to my name, essentially. So that's kind of the story of how I got to Buenos Aires.
So,
not the most glamorous story, right?
So you get to Buenos Aires, and eventually you get the idea for Ripe, which is your language learning business.
Yes.
What happened in between? Like, how did you get the idea? How did you fund your lifestyle in Buenos Aires and fund starting that business? I mean, it's cheap to launch a business. It can be if you bootstrap, but there's still costs like hosting and website domains and things like that. So walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just cost to start the business. I didn't start the business in Buenos Aires. It took me about 6 months additionally, and we can go into a bit of the details, but I didn't have money to survive. I booked this ticket, and I just naively believed that I would figure things out. And I had about $700 to my name, and that was after paying my rent. So I had at least a month to figure things out. And it was a special time in Buenos Aires, and it doesn't exist anymore. And the reason why I say that is in the currency of Argentina, which is pesos, Argentina pesos, what you could do before, so a dollar in the US would be officially worth 8.5 pesos in Argentina. But what you could do is, because they use the US currency as a hedge, similar to the way you use gold or silver, just in case the currency goes to the fireworks. What you could do is you could go to the black market, which sounds super sketchy.
I've heard of this, though. This is a thing.
You've heard of it?
Yes.
Okay. So this isn't like completely strange. I'm not crazy. But it's a street, as you know, and people go cambio, cambio, cambio. And they start like yelling out this, which is currency or change. And what you could do is you take literally US cash. So I had $700 of US cash with me, which is everything that I had at the time, in a foreign country, didn't speak Spanish, a word of it. And I heard about this through like a Lonely Planet forum online at a hostel. I was like researching how I can figure out how to make money or change my currency. And from that instant, what you could do is you could get a dollar. And as I mentioned, it's 8.5 officially. But if you go to the black market, you can get literally a dollar would be worth 15 pesos, and sometimes even 16 during the summers. So I was able to essentially double my money from the first week I was there. And that was how I was able to sustain at least another month of living in Buenos Aires. And in the middle of that, how I was able to continue supporting myself was I used an article that I actually wrote about, which is I used AngelList to kind of hack getting consulting gigs to be able to survive. So rather than going through the traditional path, I was able to use some of the experiences that I had and essentially get a ton of consulting offers in a span of 30 days, and was actually making decent money at the time working remotely. So I was helping companies with their growth and marketing efforts And at the same time, I was living in Buenos Aires. And that's kind of how I was able to sustain myself before I got the idea for Ripe.
Awesome. So help people who are not familiar with this concept of consulting or freelancing understand how you were able to pitch yourself if you didn't have a degree, didn't have a piece of paper saying that you're an expert. What were some of the ways that you got around that and got companies to trust you?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of factors into it. So number one, I was able to go and apply myself. I knew that if I was to take the competitive advantages or the, let's say, strengths that I have, which is scrappiness, being able to work with startups specifically, it's a disadvantage if I decide to position myself into the traditional corporate setting. So this is something that I think is important for everyone to understand, is figure out what your unique strengths are or what your unique experiences that very few people have or not everybody will have that differentiates you. And then find a place in the marketplace that would allow you to have an advantage there. So my advantage was not being in the corporate setting, and my advantage was more in the startups because of the previous startup that I had. So that was essentially how I was able to position myself. And then personal branding certainly helps. So at that time, I was writing and I was building my personal brand even before going down to Buenos Aires. And it's interesting in the online world because people don't meet you face to face, that there is a sense of putting someone on a pedestal because they are a thought leader, they're able to express their opinion. It's like a weird, I don't know how to explain that. I think that's why personal branding is so fascinating to me.
It's really interesting.
And just being able to share your own opinions about your thoughts, you immediately differentiate yourself from just about anyone else that doesn't have it. Because the resume is certainly extinct today, but the first thing people will do is Google you. And what they see once that Google research shows up is really going to be how they determine what you are going to be. And especially for me, it was marketing. So that's essentially how I was able to differentiate myself in that aspect. And to be honest with you, I worked for free for the first 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And it was hard because
you needed money.
Because I needed money, and just working for free was just difficult in itself, just to be able to overcome that ego process.
Yeah.
And to be honest, especially when you're working remotely, you have to kind of convince people that you can deliver the results. And I think too many people start by demanding something, but the hardest part is getting into the door. And once someone builds a relationship with you and you give them the processes to succeed, it's going to be harder for them to let you go rather than just trying to get you in the door itself. So that's kind of how I was able to, I guess, hack the process a little bit and make it a little bit easier. But by no means was it an easy process at all.
Was your early personal brand what it is now under the name of Growth List? Or would you consider that part of your personal brand? Yeah,
so it was, to be honest, the SeanKim.com was taken at that time about 4 or 5 years ago.
KimberlyRich.com's taken as well.
It's such a common name, right?
Yeah.
I'm working on it. But the Growth List was the personal brand that I was under, and it's said by Sean Kim. So when someone searched my name, that would be the first thing that they would see.
Yeah. And when did you launch the podcast? I have a couple questions about the podcast. I've obviously checked out your website and seen what you've got going on. So when did that come into the picture?
Yeah, so the podcast, so a couple of questions I asked before launching the podcast, which was, what's a new project that I could take on? And I knew podcast was becoming the new blog, and I wanted to be in front of the wave so that I'm not behind in certain trends. And I asked myself, if something fails, and this is something that I ask myself whenever I get into a new project, which is, in the worst case scenario, if I put my time, money, and energy into launching this new project, which is the podcast, what's something that I can get out of it, even if it completely fails or even if I decide not to continue? And I understood that when it comes to podcasting, relationship building is so huge. And the people you can gain access to, especially if you're personable, if you make the effort, is massive. And it was just like a a free way to get mentorship and
Totally.
be able to continue to grow, as I'm sure you know. So I knew that at the worst case scenario, this is something that I was able to improve my interview skills and to be able to meet all these interesting people. And that's essentially when I decided to try it out.
So people will obviously be able to go to your website. We'll have everything linked up in the show notes. And when they do, they'll see that you've had some pretty well-known people on your show. What are some ways that you've found most effective to connect with those influencers?
You mean how to get into the door itself, or once we are in the conversation, how to connect with them?
Oh, how to get into the door itself, like how to get them to say yes to come on your show if, they've got a lot going on, their own businesses, likely their own shows. So why are they saying yes to you, and what can listeners take and start, enacting in their own lives and businesses?
Yeah, and it's very similar to the way I was able to get consulting gigs in the beginning is really branding and being able to position yourself so that you're able to bring value first. So the first couple of guests that I had on were really through my own internal network, and I really was able to hustle and to be able to get these guys on. But almost everyone after became an easier process. And the way you position yourself is you have to recognize that a lot of these guys don't have a lot of time to filter through. And if they're really big influencers, as I mentioned, for any one of the listeners that are listening to this, we just had Steve Aoki on the show, and Steve doesn't look at any of these emails, right? It's his assistant, it's his agent, it's his publicist. So really it's about convincing the publicists and the gatekeepers why you're worth talking to. And the way I originally got in there is I was able to name some of the previous guests that we had on that I knew this guest either previously spoke to. I would even see who they're following on Instagram to see if there's a match. And any name recognition that you can bring onto the table is a huge leg up, because that saves them the effort from doing the back research on how long you've been doing this. And for me, at least, when I first started, I was doing it for like a couple of months, but I was able to get these guys on because of, doing the back research and how I can really bring value to them. And it's really simple, but your email headline is so important. It's about 80% of it, because they get so many of these inquiries that most of them don't even get read. So it doesn't matter how great your content is or your body message is. If you're not able to get the clicks and actually get into the door itself, it's really going to be difficult. So those are probably the two biggest hacks.
What do you think about the follow-up? How often do you follow up with someone if you don't hear back, knowing that they get a million of these emails?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm still trying to navigate through that right now. I'm just relentless about it, to be honest with you. Knowing that most of these people don't get offended. Right.
They're used to
it. They're very used to it, and they, often they forget you. So they forget to respond, or they didn't see the message, or sometimes it's going to be on draft when they were going to send it. So a lot of the times it's just about recognizing that and then just being able to take that step forward with it.
Yeah, not to take it personally. I mean, these people are busy.
Absolutely. Yeah, most of these guys, they get so many of these different inquiries, and you just have to be able to stand out in any way possible. And a follow-up is factor in standing out, because some of these guys, they just would send out a template message and they never follow up.
So it sounds like most of your outreach is through email. Have you used any other channels in any creative ways to sort of stand out in someone's eyes?
Instagram DM.
Yep.
It's probably one of the most effective ways today, and who knows when they'll get rid of it. So yeah, I hope this is evergreen advice. So when someone listens to this podcast in 2 years, it still is relevant. But anyone that's listening now and you are looking to get in touch with better guests, that is one of the channels, because most of these guys are, when they're Instagram storing, it's most of the time they're trying to be personable. So it's going to be them holding the phone. It's their personal phone. And yes, a manager might use it sometimes, but most of the time they're going to have access to it. So when your Instagram DMing them, it's going to go directly to them. It's not going to go directly to the email. That's going to go directly to the assistant. That's going to be forwarded to the publicist. Then it's going to be to the guest. It's going to go directly to them. So it's probably one of the best things you can do today, just to be able to go out and reach out to them. And it's not offensive. It's like it's an interesting tool because it's so personable. So yeah, it's so relevant, I find. So whenever you see like a story that you can relate to, whether it's like they're taking a story about Austin, or they're at a concert maybe, make it relatable, and it's not a template message, right? You can say, oh, I love that artist as well. By the way, big fan of your work, da 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 da, instead of hi there, da 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 da. So it's a completely different way to approach, and I think it's going to be the future of how cold calling or how all of these networking style works.
Yeah, I had found similar success with Snapchat DM, but I think that they've altered the way that works now. Don't quote me on this, but I don't think that everyone is as accessible via DM that they used to be on Snapchat, the way that they still are on Instagram. Right. And then the drawback to trying to take that route with Twitter is that you can only DM someone if they're following you back. But I do feel like Twitter is still a really good avenue if you're trying to connect with people, because even though a lot of influencers automate their tweets, I find that they still check a lot of their replies as well. So
for sure,
that's another one to have in your pocket.
People are always tweeting about them, I guess, right?
Yep. Yeah, and then you'd be surprised how many people actually engage with their own friends on Twitter. So they are using their accounts actively. So just a couple ideas for people who are listening.
Yeah, it's very interesting, actually. And another thing is just to be around them. So even when it comes to Instagram or Facebook, if you're really set on getting a certain guest on, you have to be engaging with them.
Totally. Right? Or they're going to forget you.
Or they're going to forget you. Unless they have like 50 million followers, a lot of them see, I've got friends of mine that have, million, 2 million, even 5 million followers, and they actually see a trend of people that are liking and commenting on their photo because they genuinely look at it for feedback. We're human beings at the end of the day, so they like to be able to navigate what people are saying about them. And when they see the same names coming up over and over again, you're going to get a much highly likelihood of getting some sort of a response when you do reach out to them on Instagram or email.
Totally agree. So I'm curious, if you could connect with 5 people who are currently living and have dinner with them, who would it be and why? I've never asked this on the show before, by the way. Yeah, okay. 5. A good dinner party number.
What kind of dinner party are we having? Is it going to be
This is your call.
Oof. Okay. That's living right now.
Living, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta confine it somewhat.
Oh, that's tough. President Obama.
Love it.
Ray Kurzweil. So President Obama would be around global politics and understanding how to become a better communicator and a better leader. Ray Kurzweil would be more on the futurist side. He's the one that says that he has got an interesting prediction where by 2030, with every year of research that comes in, we'll increase our life expectancy by another year, which is 13 years from now, which is crazy. So that would definitely be one. Let's see. Probably a comedian, I think, would be really interesting to be able to mix that up. So I would say...
Gotta keep it light, right?
Gotta keep it light. Someone like Kevin Hart.
He's doing a lot for his personal brand.
He's killing it.
Yeah.
He's like one of the most followed people, right? It's insane. And then probably like a musician like John Legend.
Love John Legend.
We get a little piano on the side over there, and he could start playing a little tune for us. And last one.
Anyone else that inspires you or has been pretty integral in your life or business that you haven't spoken to already?
That I haven't spoken to? There's so many, I find. Tony Robbins is probably another one. Richard Branson. I would say Tony Robbins was a big influence in my life. As many people get influenced especially when they're in that worst place. I feel like a lot of people go and search up guys like Tony when they're in that worst, just crappy situation. And just that mindset shift that he provided was a big game changer for me. So those would be the 5 people. It's all very diversified.
Have you been to any of his events?
I have, yeah.
Which ones?
I went 2 years ago, I believe. Yeah, 2 years ago I went with my mom when she got divorced. So it was like a way to just kind of have a mindset shift. And we did the whole Firewalk, Unleash Your Power Within.
Yeah, UPW.
Just insane. One of the greatest events that I've been to. So yeah, it was awesome.
That's amazing. I'm a big Tony fan. I've crewed a lot of his events after attending. Anyone who listens to the show knows that I'm passionate about that environment and those people. So I always love asking about that.
Well, hopefully you can get him on the show too, right?
Hey, nothing but time. He's just a person, right?
Yeah, exactly. He'll be around for a while, especially with this whole longevity thing happening.
Hey, I actually did notice that a couple events I was crewing, they were recording in 3D or VR, I should say. So they're planning.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I know.
Damn.
So
yeah, we're on the cusp of it.
We really are. Speaking of the future, what do you see happening for Growth List? Like, what's your long-term vision for the podcast and that part of your business and your brand?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's been an evolving process. It's just in the recent year, actually, maybe not even a year, in the last 6 months is really when things started to get a little bit more clear for the direction that I wanted to take it. And I'm almost glad that I didn't make it around just my own name. And the Growth List is more of a community now. And I'm hoping that it will live on even after I'm gone, and it's like a separate brand in itself. So what the Growth List is essentially it's a media company that is a mixture of let's say a holding company or venture capital company. And the goal of it and the mission of the Growth List is to help people reach their full potential. This is something that I'm really passionate about, and it's something that I bring on guests to talk about. And really the first part of what we're doing is building the community and building the audience so that we're able to spread our message to a further place. And the second stage is to get a better idea of what are the ways that we can create more value for the people that are part of our community. And for us, the third stage that would lead to that is to build products, services, and companies and brands around that by reverse engineering what our audience are looking for.
What they're asking for. Yeah.
Exactly. So our first company, which is Ripe, which is a company that I started, would actually be a part of that portfolio. And our mission with Ripe is to connect people around the world through languages and eventually in all forms of coaching. So it could be health coaching, it could be mental wellness, it could be music lessons. And it's really the tagline is your personal coach. I'm working right now, which I don't think I've announced yet, which is a sleeping product company where we're helping people. It's a wellness company helping people fall asleep better. I think that's going to be a trend that's going to be really big. And over the next 5 or 10 years, we hope to bring and launch many more brands based on what our audience is looking for, all around helping people reach their full potential and to improve their quality of lives. So that's really what the Growth List is all about.
I love that. It's so nice to hear it from your words because when you come across your website, there's so many great pieces of information that it's like, oh, I could want more from the health side of things or from the making money online side of things. And so understanding that you actually have a vision that you're looking to take that business to is nice to know that there is a future for it and there's longevity there. I feel it. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, we haven't publicly announced anything like that because we're still in that first stage right now. Yeah. We're building brands.
Just did.
we did now. But, on the website and stuff, just because, we don't want we don't want to really promote anything that until we build up that community yet. And, the reason why we have, wealth and health and, all of these things is for us, at least the 3 pillars, at least that makes up and would allow you to reach your full potential is, being able to take care of your health first. And then it's around being able to actually build a business or to have some sort of wealth that you can give back to. And then the next step is around wisdom and knowledge. So those three pillars are the ones that we're going to be really building around. And then whatever happens within one of those factors would impact the other one. So if you're not healthy, you're not going to be able to make more money. You're not going to be able to think clearly, and vice versa. So that's kind of the way we're structuring everything that we do in the growth list.
I love it. Yeah, it's very similar. In the coaching that I do, there's 5 pillars of high performance, which if you're familiar with Brendan Burchard, he speaks to these often. And, those are clarity, energy, productivity, courage, and influence. And it's kind of like if one of those is depleted, you're sort of not ranking high in any of the others as well. But as soon as you start getting more clarity, you have more energy to be more productive. You're a bit more courageous about what it is that you're pursuing, and therefore have greater influence with the people that you're trying to reach. So it's a similar concept, like working on one pillar is totally going to have an impact on the others.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it took me a while to really prioritize my health. Probably took me like years. And just in the last year or so, I started doing it, and it's been a game changer for me.
Right.
So
I think a lot of entrepreneurs realize that too, because it's so easy to embrace the hustle. And then you realize like that hustle is going to burn you out if you aren't also embracing some sleep and some healthy habits. So yeah, very important.
Totally.
Well, Sean, I have a couple more questions that I ask at the end of every episode. But before we do that, I wanted to give you a chance to tell people where they can follow you and listen to the podcast. So what are the best places online?
Yeah, so just what we talked about, you can go to thegrowthlist.com. That's really where the home of everything lives. You can check out our articles. You can check out the podcast there. Or if you want to go directly to the podcast, you can just search up Sean Kim iTunes or podcast on Google, and that will take you directly to the podcast itself. So
awesome. Well, Sean, I also do want to take a moment and just acknowledge you. I feel like it's really important for me to have people like you on the show as examples of how possible it is to not follow society's scripts or your family's scripts and still make something for yourself and your life that is fulfilling and makes a difference. So I just want to acknowledge you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate those words.
You're welcome. So my final 2 questions, which I love asking because I think that it is really important for us all to think about this once in a while. Number 1 is, what is your why for everything that you're working on and the life that you've created?
Yeah. It's hard to say if I have a central why. I think for me, at least, is to be an example of what reaching your full potential means. For me, coming in and into this country as an immigrant and not having the example of a role model, not having the example of what success means, and being able to not follow someone else's path, but being able to follow your own. I think the best way to lead people and to influence people is to be an example rather than just to lecture them or just to be able to have a talk about it. It's really to be able to show people that this is where I come from, this is what I've been through, and this is who I am today. And I'm only continuing to improve. And for me, it's a constant challenge. And hopefully I can bring people a part of that mission. The second thing, which I actually talked to Steve about yesterday, was one of the things that we've realized is when you look back to the course of history, especially for the Asian community, what we realized is there are very few people, in fact, a handful of people that have been able to go past their own community within the Asian community and to be able to be globally recognized and loved and influenced in a global setting. And I've traveled, so this is a personal experience that I've been through, and it's part of me. My competitive advantage is I feel that I can be relatable to other people because of the travel experience that I've been through and the struggles that I've been through. And for me, I guess a big part of my why is to hopefully be an example and to hopefully bring and support other people within my own community that can really be put on a spotlight so that we're bringing our community forward as well. So there's a couple of whys that I think I really stand for, but at the end of the day, it's really about improving myself and to be able to bring other with me at the same time.
Awesome. So leveraging or raising up other people from the Asian community who want to have like a global impact.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Somewhat related, when I first launched the Bold Life movement, I was at a conference called World Domination Summit. I don't know if you're familiar.
We're having Chris on the podcast actually very soon.
Awesome.
I was just chatting with him. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, great guy. So one of the things that happened at that conference that gave me a lot of inspiration to come home and start this was a Japanese woman got up on stage and she said, I don't get to hug people and be as expressed and open in my home culture as I do at this event. And it's one of my favorite things. And she had three of the other Japanese attendees come up on stage with her and just hug her and just do something that would have been sort of not traditional where they're from. And I was like, I really want people to feel like no matter where they come from, where they're living in the world, that they can be expressed. And, that for me, being bold is basically being expressed. And so that was just like so moving for me. And I bet she has no idea how much she's impacted my life, and so I definitely can resonate with your mission.
What's your why, Kimberly?
My why, always evolving, but I think ultimately my why is just to inspire people to be expressed, to not be scared to be who it is that they really are based on what they think society or their family will judge them by. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
I get to that every day.
I'm giving a talk actually in a couple of days, and the central theme is just that to avoid regret, you have to be bold. And for me, that boldness is authentic. You have to be authentic and expressed.
I love it. Well, I can sense it I know we're not face to face right now, but I can sense it even through video right now.
Thank you. Which is a great segue because my final question is, what is your definition of a bold life or of being bold?
I think for me, and again, I think this is evolving, but I think a similar and common pattern exists when it comes to being bold. And at least for me, I think it's going past the traditional pathways that have been created for you throughout the course of history, throughout the course of your family history, throughout the course of what your friends are doing, charting your own path, knowing that it's not going to always work out, knowing that there is not going to be a light at the end of the tunnel, but understanding that there really anything can be done, right? And the reason why we live in a world today is because somebody created it. They didn't know what they were doing at all times. So for me, it's being able to go past and chart a different path and then create a trail for other people to follow, which is what we talked about of what my why is. So to me, I think that's what bold is. And you got to have the guts to go through that.
Definitely. Sean Kim, well, it was so fun getting to know you, and we'll definitely have all of the links in the show notes. So thank you so much for coming on.
This is great. Thanks so much for having me on. For anyone that is listening and watching, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Sean. Big thanks to Sean for coming on today's show. If you want to hear more about Sean or to listen to his podcast, visit theboldlifemovement.com/062. Sean's pillars of health, wealth, and happiness that he promotes over at The Growth List are much like the core tenets of high performance, which I help my clients with. So if you're interested in learning about how you can create the habits and levels of performance that Sean and his guests have managed to create, then I invite you to apply for a free strategy session with me. This is a complimentary high-performance coaching session for individuals who are committed to raising the bar. Get more details about what this entails and see if you're qualified at theboldlifemovement.com/HPC. Again, that's theboldlifemovement.com/HPC.